Buzzwords and restrictive definitions in Qigong. That is going to be the topic of this episode of Qi Life. So one of the things about us as humans is we often like to follow trends and fashion. And this occurs in all sorts of different ways and hairstyles. Don't know that I have too much flexibility with the trend of my hairstyle, with clothing, with the color we paint the inside of our houses, things like that. And it also even extends to the language that we use to describe things. Certain words will become fashionable at different points, and sometimes this is just in casual usage, and sometimes it's actually in the words that we use to describe different things. And this certainly also happens from time to time in Qigong, where sometimes, a particular word will become very fashionable and people will use it a lot to describe different things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and then also that second part about restrictive definitions, how that comes in relating to these buzzwords as well. And then some of the different ways this gets applied, because sometimes there's no harm, it's quite healthy even to be using a buzzword. Other times it's not so healthy, sometimes it actually starts to distort meanings and cause problems. So the first way that sometimes these buzzwords can be used is simply to attract attention. So if a word has become popular and it's known that lots of people have become interested in this word. Now of course if they're interested in that word, they're also interested in something deeper beyond that, but for whatever reason a particular word has become popular, well, it makes perfect sense to use that word as a way to draw people's attention to something deeper underneath it, so long as, of course, the thing that's deeper underneath it is what those people are actually looking for. So a very classic, direct example of this is the way that search terms work. When you go on the internet and you search for something, people will tend to use different words to look for what it is they're wanting to find. Now, someone might have exactly what it is that someone wants to find, but if they don't use the right words, popular words, buzzwords to describe it, the people looking for that just may not find it. So you're actually really doing them a favor by using the language, the words they're familiar with, the words that are popular to describe what it is that you're doing or that you have to offer, and because that helps people to find it. So one little example of this that's become a little bit of a buzzword recently with some providers around that is the vagus nerve. There's been a lot of people who've become very fascinated by the vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is really important for a whole lot of functions within our body, and it makes up a large portion of our parasympathetic nervous system, which is important for helping things to relax and rest and restore the body and the energy system. So the vagus nerve is really important. At the same time, though, as I said, it makes up a large portion of the parasympathetic nervous system. And so often, in terms of Qigong, when we're doing different practices, a lot of times we're doing practices that, yes, they're for the parasympathetic nervous system. They're going to be beneficial to that. And we might not describe them as particularly being for the vagus nerve, although they are having an effect on the vagus nerve because it's parasympathetic nervous system as a whole. But to reach some of those people who are like, vagus nerve, they've cottoned on that vagus nerve is important, you might need to use the word vagus nerve to actually catch their attention. And then they find the thing that is going to be really beneficial for them, things that will help with their parasympathetic nervous system, including their vagus nerve. And that's going to be great for them. Now, again, I did say some provisos because, a lot of different practices are going to be more generally, the whole parasympathetic nervous system. But certainly there are some practices that will much more specifically target the vagus nerve, which might be relevant in some cases. But often what people are looking for is just, something for the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, so that's one example. And of where using a buzzword can be totally fine, actually quite healthy, help people to find what they're looking for. Another example, or another thing that can come from using buzzwords or motivation behind it. Sometimes people will take on a word, a buzzword, and they'll actually distort the meaning of the word. So they'll take a word that has a certain meaning, and then they'll add more meaning onto it. And they'll take this and kind of use it as a way to try to describe a whole lot of other stuff that otherwise maybe it's hard to describe, or maybe as a way to try to give a more definitive understanding, or a perception that there's a much more concrete understanding of something than there really is. So one example of this as it relates to Qigong that I've seen around a bit, not so much lately though. So again, I think some of these things, they go in and out of fashion. It depends how people are thinking and the words they want to use. But is the use of the word fascia. And so fascia is connective tissue. It's the sheaths of connective tissue that wrap around different organs and other tissues and hold them in place and give structural strength and integrity and create movement, all this sort of thing. And there was a trend for a while for, some Qigong teachers to talk about fascia as though like now we have discovered fascia and fascia explains how Qi moves through our body, and really kind of in a way turning it into kind of like a magic word, sort of a very sort of pseudoscientific understanding of this word. And in my mind, you can often tell when someone's kind of distorting the meaning of a word. I mean, it might not always be true, but often they will have an unusual pronunciation of the word, and you're kind of like, okay, I know the word you're saying. Why are you saying it that way? Have you not heard people just talk about this before? Sometimes it's like, you've seen it written down and you weren't sure how to say it, and you probably don't really know what it means, but then they put all this extra meaning onto it. Now, does our fascia play an important role in how energy moves through our body? Yes, of course it does. And we've known this for a long time, yeah? There's different qualities, certainly in terms of the movement of physical force through the body, in terms of how we hold postures and tensions, which affects how energy moves through the body, and even electrical conduction through the connective tissue. Yeah, we've known that for ages. Does it now somehow explain how energy moves, like Qi, as we often describe it, moves through the body? No, it does not. It's just one part of many. Because Qi, as I've talked about in vlogs previously, again, maybe I'll put a link to a vlog about that in the description below, about what Qi is, or maybe an article. I've got articles on it too. Qi is much more than one type of energy, or as we normally use it. You can actually say Qi to describe single types of energy. But as we're describing it within our bodies as our living energy, we're normally talking about all the different types of our living energy and how they combine together and work together in, often in quite sophisticated ways, and they become more than the sum of their part. So the action of the fascia describes part of that. But then there's much more. There's the action of the nerves and of the bones and of the blood vessels and and so many other things just on a physical level, and possibly things beyond that we don't fully understand, that all go together into both what our Qi, our energy is, and how it moves. And so to distort the meaning and to load too much onto one word and to then actually give it a meaning beyond what it really is, I don't think it's helpful. It's better to have a really practical understanding, like this fascia, it does this. Cool, great. And maybe little by little we know more about it. Cool, great. But acknowledge it's just one part of the equation, and so on. All right. A third way that sometimes buzzwords or specific words are used. So this is maybe getting a little away from the buzzwords, although there's a connection, is sometimes people take a certain word and they put a very specific restrictive meaning or definition on it. And so this is kind of the opposite of what I described with the use of the word fascia, which again, don't see it so much before, but it was quite popular a while ago. This is kind of the opposite. Instead of loading way too much meaning onto a word, they take away a lot of the possible meanings of a word and now say it only means this one thing. which is pretty problematic as well, because they're taking our language, which is something that we have in common, and essentially we all have a right to. We all have a right to the shared common meanings of that language, and then saying, no, only the way, you know, only our definition of this word is the correct definition of this word. Everyone else is wrong. It's like, yeah, but everyone else has been using that word for those meanings for hundreds or thousands of years. So, like, you know, it doesn't really make sense. One area I've seen this applied to, simple word, meditation, right? Meditation can mean so many things to different people. There are so many different types of meditation, and they're all valuable in their own way. And it's helpful sometimes when you're talking about meditation to then talk more specifically about what type of meditation that, you know, you're describing, so people can understand what it is they're doing and what the benefits are. Absolutely. But there are some people, and I've seen multiple people who do this, who say, only this is meditation, nothing else is meditation. It's a very restrictive meaning. It's like, there's just the one type, nothing else is meditation. That's not right at all. Now, they could say something similar to that, and for it to be accurate and not disingenuous, they could say something like, within my practice, this is what I mean by the term meditation. This is what I'm describing. I am not describing other practices. Cool, great. We know what your definition is. That's awesome. We now understand your perspective better. Great. But it's not invalidating everyone else's use of a very common word. You know, and restricting their ability to understand things that they've learnt, things that they've practiced, things that they might explore further, which can do them a great deal of benefit. All right, so what are some other words that sometimes fall into this? So one of the things that made me think about this topic to do it is actually, it's an email from someone. They sent it to me ages ago, and it's taken me a long time to address this, so apologies for that. But I finally dredged it up, and it was about the use of the word somatic as it applies to different practices. Now, the email that she wrote me was about some quite nuanced things about different somatic practices and why some somatic practices tend to focus in a certain way and others focus in another way. And I might make a vlog separately about that, a lot more nuance. But part of what she said in that email was, because she'd been doing different training and different types of modalities and practices and learning about them, is that amongst the purists within certain of these schools, they would say somatic practices are only the ones where you use verbal instruction to then help people to then connect to their body. And that practices where people use movement and maybe demonstrate the movement, show people the movement for them to copy and follow, are not somatic practices. That is really a divergence from the meaning of the word, because the word somatic means basically of the body, and the definition or the general meaning for that is things that we experience in our body. That's a somatic experience. And so somatic practices tend to be ones where we use the body and we develop the connection between the mind and the body. So we have more of awareness of our body, and we actually use, or potentially use, the body as a way to process experiences and so on. So it's about connection between mind and body. Anything that fits that description is therefore somatic. Whether you're using words, whether you're using demonstration, whether you're using touch, any of these things that connect to the body are somatic. So to narrow it down, I think often this is used where people come up with these restrictive meanings. They use it as a power play of sorts, as a way to say, only my thing is right, everyone else is wrong, where it's actually what they've done is create a very specific definition, and therefore, of course, only their thing fits the specific definition, and everyone else is wrong. But the other people aren't wrong. They're just using the word along with its more common usage. Yeah. So there's other buzzwords that come up as well. I think I've covered those three main sort of areas that I see in terms of the use of those buzzwords. Sometimes it's fine, even good. Like you use a buzzword, it helps get people's attention for something that's going to be useful for it. The use of the word is accurate. It's just maybe a word you wouldn't always use, but you use one that, yeah, and that gets their attention. Awesome, great. Another one being where it's to give an impression of a greater, more finite, defined understanding of something maybe than we really have, loading too much meaning onto something, kind of turning it into something magical and more important than it really is. That's another one. And then the other one is like restricting meaning as a way to say that other people are wrong. So yeah, first one healthy, other two not so healthy. I think it's good to be quite flexible in how we use words and language, because it's just an abstraction anyway. You know, any language, any word we use is an abstraction. We're using whether it's vocal or written or whatever it is, abstraction to describe a deeper reality. And what's important is that deeper reality, right? Yeah, the words, the abstractions, they're useful, but they're always going to be able to use in more than one way. I could go through some other buzzwords that come up. Like, okay, a classic one is mindfulness. That one's become pretty popular lately. And sometimes people have, like, again, they get like a real specific definition of what it means to be mindful, but you're like, okay, what does mindfulness or being mindful really mean? It's actually really broad, but it is having conscious awareness of what's going on. And there can be lots of different layers to that. Actually, conscious awareness of your own thoughts, for example, or of your own motions, or of what you're doing physically. All of these are parts of mindfulness. I'm reminded of someone who who told me that they're very distinguished, I think it was a Zen teacher of some sort, when they were doing different practices and discussing different things, would get like sort of quite upset about the way people were using mindfulness as a bit of a buzzword lately, because this teacher would say, mindfulness, what does it mean? It just means to pay attention. Which in many ways it does. It means, yeah, you're paying attention, you're being mindful. Of course, there's a lot of value in that, being mindful and paying attention. But yeah, so another buzzword, there's lots of others. Hopefully this vlog has been interesting. Hopefully maybe it gives you some food for thought or awareness about the use of different words and language, enough that maybe sometimes you can take a little step back and go like, okay, what's really being described here? Why is it being described in that way? And most importantly, who cares about the words? What's the deeper truth underneath that? All right, I look forward to seeing you on another vlog soon.